Is that this House do now adjourn. The Honourable Member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
That came quickly.
Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Rising today at the hour of adjournment. I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker. Take a sip of water. I'm rising today at the hour of adjournment to pursue a question I asked May 2nd, 2024, the day on which the Minister of Finance tabled a bill called Bill C-69. Now, this is what's called in the vernacular, Mr. Speaker, an omnibus budget bill. Liberals will remember those words because it was in the platform of the Liberal Party they would not introduce such things as omnibus budget bills. Liberals had also promised that they would make sure that legislation brought forward would be have full consultation with Indigenous peoples as required under the United Nations Declaration of Indigenous Peoples. That didn't happen either. And so what we had here was, again, a promise to improve environmental assessment. So what I did on May 2nd, Mr. Speaker, was refer to this as something of a hat trick. 3 times, 3 different platform promises broken in one omnibus budget bill. Now, the part that concerns me the most, Mr. Speaker, although it's hard to say which is worse, I think that what we've had happen here is a gross violation of our responsibility as parliamentarians to respond to the challenges and the need to have environmental assessment legislation that works and to ensure that it's constitutionally valid and that it's studied in the appropriate committee. Now, I only have, at this point, something less than 3 minutes, but let me try to point out one of the major reasons that it's so deeply offensive that the Minister of Finance brought forward the changes being made to the Environmental Impact Bill. And one of those reasons, I mean, this is this is, as we said, omnibus. Yeah, so over 40 different divisions, just to mention, there's over 300, 400 sections to the bill. We get to the environmental assessment bits by the time we get to Division 43, Part 6, and then you start realizing, oh, wait a minute. No, Division 28, sorry, Part 6. Start reading it and realizing, I think, and this is what I think as an environmental lawyer, and I've consulted some friends who do constitutional law, that they may not have fixed the problem that the Supreme Court had because the way in which they've defined when something is in federal jurisdiction is to get rid of language they think the court didn't like, which was language around such things as an adverse effect. They said, well, an adverse effect is, and throughout this, it's the same every time. An adverse effect within federal jurisdiction is a quote-unquote non-negligible adverse change. And then that's repeated multiple times. My point, Mr. Speaker, is you can't come up with a conclusion that an effect is non-negligible before you've studied the project and have some idea what the impact is going to be before you decide ahead of time it's non-negligible. I think it's a tautology. It's hastily drafted. Well, of course, because the court ruled that their last version violated the Constitution by having federal intrusions into provincial jurisdiction. Here's the problem, Mr. Speaker. This bill continues with what Stephen Harper did in wrecking environmental assessment in, yes again, Omnibus Budget Bill C-38 in spring 2012. This was a chance to fix it. The Liberals blew it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice and Attorney General Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the member from Saanich Gulf Islands for her intervention and for her ongoing advocacy for environmental causes in Canada. Mr. Speaker, countries around the world are taking decisive action towards combating climate change and protecting the environment, and Canada is no different. Tackling the climate crisis requires many innovative solutions, and one of the tools in the toolbox is achieving a healthy environment, including a strong and effective Impact Assessment Act. Last October, the Supreme Court of Canada issued an opinion regarding the...
Interrupt the honourable member just to make sure the phone is not near the microphone there somewhere. Something was vibrating, so just for interpreters. That's okay. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Doing the late show, I guess. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last October, the Supreme Court of Canada issued an opinion regarding the constitutionality of the Impact Assessment Act, stating that we need to clearly focus on the areas of federal jurisdiction and underscoring that we work with provinces in the spirit of cooperative federalism. More specifically, the Supreme Court of Canada stated that decisions under the Act must be tied exclusively to adverse effects within federal jurisdiction, and that the definition of effects within federal jurisdiction must be clearly defined. I'm happy to say that last June, the Government of Canada delivered on its promise to quickly and meaningfully amend the Impact Assessment Act to respond to the Supreme Court of Canada and provide regulatory certainty for major project proponents, Indigenous partners in Canada's investment climate. The amended Act clearly focuses on preventing or mitigating effects in areas of federal responsibility. It also provides increased flexibility and new tools to harmonize the federal process with those of other jurisdictions and facilitate greater cooperation, and as a result, it reduces duplication and increases efficiency and certainty with the goal of achieving one project, one assessment. Our government is committed to ensuring that Indigenous consultation is included in the work we do. The United Nations Declaration on Rights of Indigenous Peoples remains an integral to the Impact Assessment Act. As such, the Act will continue to provide opportunities for meaningful engagement and the participation of Indigenous peoples in the assessment process, with the aim of securing their free, prior, and informed consent and ensuring their rights and interests are respected throughout the process. Our government is committed to ensuring that future generations are able to live in a healthy environment, and that is exactly what we will continue to do. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
In 1 minute. Oh, if there was a way I could tell the Parliamentary Secretary the 40 years of work I put into environmental assessment, how casually it was trashed when Stephen Harper came in, how clearly the mandate letter to former Minister of Environment, Catherine McKenna, said, fix this, and how she didn't. Didn't fix it, but instead kept the Harper model, and because they kept the Harper model, the court found it unconstitutional. We had a system that worked. The expert panel on environmental assessment gave this government clear information for what to do. They chose not to do it. What it means is that right now a project clearly in federal jurisdiction could wipe out an endangered species. It would never hit a red flag. It would never hit a trigger. It would never get assessed because we abandoned the core principles we've had for EA since 1993.
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, look, I admire this member and I admire her passion. She's baiting me to defend the Harper government, and there's no chance I'm going to do that, of course. I will defend this government's record on the environment. I will defend the former Minister of the Environment, Catherine McKenna. We have taken every step along the way to make sure that the assessment process works, it satisfies constitutional requirements, and it satisfies the federal-provincial boundaries, and that there is no obstruction in getting projects approved. One project, one process is important to us, and that is our goal, and that is what we're going to do. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Dauphin, Swan River, Nipawin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.